Rebecca Fields closed her eyes against the leather headrest of the luxury shuttle, feeling the hum of the engine beneath her as the city disappeared behind tinted windows. 3 days at the Meridian Architectural Group's elite corporate retreat should have felt like recognition, but sharing the same exclusive compound with Howard Brown, her brilliant and impossibly intimidating boss, felt more like walking a tightrope than claiming a victory. The company had reserved an entire lakeside estate for its top-level staff, complete with private suites, heated pools, and glass-walled conference rooms overlooking the water. And somehow, Rebecca had made the list. At 26, she was the youngest project coordinator ever, invited, a fact that sent equal waves of pride and panic through her chest. She had poured 2 years of sleepless nights into Meridian, sketching concepts until her wrist ached, pitching ideas that senior architects claimed as their own, proving herself in a world where brilliance without recognition was just expensive wallpaper. But catching Howard Brown's attention came with complications she hadn't anticipated. He sat 3 rows ahead in the shuttle now, his dark suit jacket draped over the seat beside him, his profile sharp and unreadable as he reviewed documents on his tablet. Everything about Howard Brown radiated control and precision. From the way his perfectly tailored clothing never wrinkled to the cold efficiency with which he dismantled mediocrity in meetings, Rebecca had spent countless late evenings working under his exacting standards, learning to anticipate his critiques before he voiced them. Earning his rare, clipped approval felt like capturing lightning in a bottle. The estate emerged through the trees like something from an architectural magazine, all clean lines and natural stone, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the lake's glassy surface. Rebecca stepped out of the shuttle into the cool evening air, breathing in the scent of pine and fresh water, feeling the knots in her shoulders begin to loosen. Maybe this wouldn't be the nightmare she'd imagined after all. We've all had that moment where we're finally seen by someone we admire, but what if being seen changes everything? If you've ever felt invisible or underestimated, this story is for you. Subscribe and join our community, because Rebecca's journey is just beginning, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Rebecca's mind went blank, then flooded with 1,000 thoughts at once. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. Humiliation crashed over her in waves, hot, suffocating, absolute. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there, water dripping from her skin, every nerve in her body screaming at her to vanish. Howard's eyes widened, his mouth opening as if to speak, but no sound came out. For a man who commanded boardrooms with surgical precision, he looked utterly shattered. His gaze jerked away, landing somewhere on the ceiling, the floor, anywhere but her. I'm sorry. I didn't. His voice cracked, and he took a sharp step backward, nearly stumbling over his own feet. The door was open. I thought security issue. I wasn't God. I'm sorry. Rebecca's hands fumbled for the towel she'd left poolside, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely grip the fabric. She wrapped it around herself, clutching it like armor, but it felt paper thin. What are you even doing here? The words came out harsh, defensive, a shield against the mortification burning through her chest. Howard finally looked at her again, and something in his expression shifted. The sharp edges softened, his jaw unclenched. I couldn't sleep, he said quietly, his voice steadier now, but still raw. I saw the pool room door ajar from the hallway. I thought someone forgot to close it, or... He stopped, exhaling hard. I should have knocked. I should have called security. I wasn't thinking. The silence stretched between them, taut and electric. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't read his face, couldn't tell if he was horrified or something else entirely. The air felt too thick, too charged. I'll go, Howard said abruptly, turning toward the door. But he hesitated, glancing back. Rebecca, He stopped again, shaking his head as if trying to clear it. I'm sorry. Then he was gone. Rebecca stood frozen for another breath, then another, before her legs finally moved. She grabbed her clothes, dressed with trembling hands, and slipped out through a side exit. The hallway was mercifully empty. She walked quickly, head down, praying no one would see her. By the time she reached her room, her entire body was shaking. Howard made it back to his suite on autopilot, his mind replaying the scene in excruciating detail. The way the water had clung to her skin, the shock in her eyes, the vulnerability he had no right to witness. He loosened his tie with rough, frustrated movements and poured himself a drink he didn't want. What the hell is wrong with you? He sank into the chair by the window, staring out at the dark lake, but all he could see was her. Rebecca lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her heart still racing. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. Her mind wouldn't stop spinning, replaying the moment, dissecting every second, every word, every look. What did he see? What was he thinking? She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to erase the memory, but it clung to her like the water that had dripped from her skin. Sleep didn't come. Not for hours. The knock came just after midnight, soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. Rebecca sat up in bed, her heart lurching. She'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, replaying the pool scene until it felt burned into her mind. For a moment, she considered pretending she was asleep, but something in the careful rhythm of that knock told her exactly who it was. She pulled on a cardigan over her tank top and opened the door. Howard stood in the hallway, and he looked nothing like the man who commanded conference rooms with icy precision. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His bow tie hung loose around his unbuttoned collar. His dark hair, always so perfectly combed, was mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. He looked exhausted, vulnerable, human. "I know it's late," he said quietly, "but I needed to." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Can I come in? Please." Rebecca hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to say no, to protect herself from whatever this was, but she stepped aside. Howard entered slowly, stopping just inside the doorway as she closed it behind him. He didn't sit, didn't move further into the room. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for tonight, for everything. Howard, you don't have to. I do." His voice was firm but raw. "Rebecca, I've been watching your career for 2 years. Every project you've touched, every idea you've contributed, even the ones other people took credit for. I've seen it all." He paused, his expression tightening. "And I've kept my distance because I had to. Because you're brilliant, and you deserve to rise on your own merit. Not because some director showed you favoritism." Rebecca's throat tightened. "I didn't think you even noticed me. I notice everything about you." The words came out barely above a whisper. "That's the problem." The air between them felt electric, charged with something she couldn't name. Howard took a step closer, his gaze dropping to her lips before returning to her eyes. "I didn't come here to scold you," he said, his voice rough. "I came because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you for months. And tonight," he stopped, shaking his head. "Tonight just made it impossible to pretend anymore." Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she thought he might hear it. "Howard." He moved closer, and she didn't step back. His hand came up, fingers brushing a strand of damp hair from her face. The touch was feather-light, reverent. Her breath hitched. "Tell me to leave," he murmured, his face inches from hers. "Tell me this is a mistake." She couldn't. She didn't want to. Howard leaned in, and Rebecca's eyes began to flutter closed. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Sharp, deliberate, close. They jerked apart like they'd been burned. Howard stepped back, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Rebecca pressed a hand to her mouth, her whole body trembling. The footsteps passed, faded, but the moment was gone. Howard moved toward the door, his hand on the handle. He looked back at her one last time, his expression a mix of longing and restraint. "Good night, Rebecca." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the middle of her room, breathless and aching, knowing that everything between them had irrevocably changed. That moment when everything shifts between two people, when you can't pretend anymore. We've all been there. Drop a comment if you're already rooting for Rebecca and Howard, or if you think this is heading for disaster. And subscribe. Because this community is all about stories that make us feel deeply. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what comes next. Rebecca felt the stares the moment she entered the breakfast room. Nothing overt. Just lingering glances, whispers behind coffee cups, conversations that paused when she passed. She filled her plate mechanically, her skin prickling with paranoia. They couldn't know. No one saw anything. But across the room, Marissa Chen leaned against the buffet table, watching Rebecca with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marissa was senior marketing coordinator, polished, ambitious, and ruthlessly territorial. She'd been with Meridian for 5 years and made sure everyone knew it. Rebecca had always sensed her resentment, the way Marissa's jaw tightened whenever Howard praised someone else's work. Now, that calculating gaze followed Rebecca's every movement. Howard arrived late, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his expression carved from stone. He nodded curtly to the room, poured black coffee, and sat at the executive table without once looking in Rebecca's direction. The deliberate distance stung more than Rebecca expected. "You look tired," Marissa said, appearing beside Rebecca during the mid-morning break. Her tone was saccharine. "Late night?" Rebecca's grip tightened on her notebook. "Just couldn't sleep. New place." Marissa's smile sharpened. I'm a light sleeper too. Hear everything in these old buildings. Doors opening. Footsteps in hallways. She paused, letting the words hang. You'd be surprised what people notice. Rebecca's stomach dropped, but she kept her face neutral. I'm sure they do. Marissa's eyes glittered with something predatory before she walked away. The evening group dinner was an exercise in corporate theater. Executives sat at the head table, discussing market strategies and client acquisitions, while junior staff performed elaborate dances of flattery and ambition. Rebecca pushed food around her plate, mentally rehearsing her project pitch scheduled for tomorrow. Rebecca's concept for the Riverside Commons project is actually quite innovative, someone mentioned casually. Is it? Martin Drake, a senior partner, looked skeptical. I thought that was still in preliminary stages. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but Howard spoke first. It's beyond preliminary. His voice cut through the chatter. Rebecca's design integrates sustainable materials with classical forms in a way I haven't seen from anyone on staff, senior architects included. Silence rippled across the table. Every head turned toward Howard, then Rebecca. Her face burned. Howard's expression remained neutral, but she saw the tension in his jaw. He'd said too much, revealed too much. Martin raised an eyebrow. High praise, Howard. I don't usually what? Howard's tone cooled. Recognize good work when I see it? The table shifted uncomfortably. Someone changed the subject. But the damage was done. Across the room, Marissa's eyes narrowed, her mind clearly working. Rebecca retreated to her room immediately after dinner, humiliation and confusion warring in her chest. She'd barely kicked off her shoes when the knock came. She opened the door without thinking. Howard stood there, his tie loosened, concern etched across his face. I shouldn't have said that. I made things worse for you. You should go, Rebecca whispered, glancing down the hallway. I know. He stepped inside, and she closed the door. I needed to explain. Down the hall, hidden in an alcove, Marissa's phone camera clicked silently, capturing the moment Howard Brown entered Rebecca Field's room for the second night in a row. Her smile was triumphant as she reviewed the photo. Perfect. Rebecca woke to the sound of her phone vibrating relentlessly against the nightstand. She grabbed it, still groggy, and her blood turned to ice. Messages flooded in from colleagues she barely knew, from people she'd never even spoken to. Her hands shook as she opened the first one. Is this true? Attached was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. Howard Brown, tie loose, entering her room. The timestamp read, 9:47 p.m. Her vision blurred. She scrolled frantically through her messages. The photo was everywhere, group chats, email threads, even the company's internal messaging system. Her chest tightened until she couldn't breathe. The breakfast room erupted in barely concealed chaos. Clusters of employees hunched over phones, voices hushed but urgent. Eyes darted toward Rebecca the moment she appeared in the doorway. She froze, then turned and fled back down the hallway. Howard's voice thundered from the administrative wing. I want to know who leaked this. Now. Rebecca could hear him through the walls, cold, furious, demanding answers from the HR director. She pressed herself against the corridor wall, trembling. Marissa's voice floated from the breakfast room, perfectly modulated concern. I'm just asking the obvious question. Why would the director visit a junior coordinator's room that late? 2 nights in a row? A theatrical pause. I'm not saying anything happened. I'm just worried about the appearance of impropriety. The murmurs grew louder. Favoritism. Affair. Abuse of power. Rebecca couldn't listen anymore. She ran. The pool was empty, just like that first night. Rebecca sank onto the edge, her reflection rippling in the still water. She'd come here for freedom, and now it felt like a cage. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Rebecca. She spun around. Howard stood in the doorway, his expression raw with emotion. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and knelt beside her. I'm fixing this, he said firmly. I've already demanded a full investigation. This is sabotage, and I won't let... Howard. Stop. Her voice cracked. You defending me just makes it worse. Everyone already thinks. She couldn't finish. I don't care what they think. His hand covered hers, warm and solid. I care about you, and I should have been honest about that from the beginning instead of hiding behind professionalism. Rebecca's breath hitched. You can't say things like that. Not now. Not when. When what? When it matters most? His thumb traced her knuckles. Rebecca, I've spent 2 years keeping my distance because I thought it was the right thing to do. But watching someone weaponize that distance against you. His jaw clenched. I won't stand by and let them destroy you for something I started. You didn't start anything. I was the one who... We started this together. His eyes held hers, intense and unwavering. And we'll face it together. I promise you. I will protect you. For a moment, the chaos outside faded. It was just them, the water, the truth hanging between them. The moment shattered when Rebecca's phone buzzed. A message from HR. Miss Fields and Mr. Brown are required to attend a disciplinary hearing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Attendance is mandatory. Howard read it over her shoulder, his expression hardening. Then we'll face them together. But Rebecca's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The conference room felt like a courtroom. 4 board members sat along one side of the table, their expressions ranging from stern to uncomfortable. Janet Morris from HR occupied the head seat, her leather portfolio open, pen poised. The morning light streaming through the windows felt accusatory. Rebecca sat with her hands folded in her lap, willing them to stop trembling. Howard sat beside her, his posture rigid but his presence somehow steadying. Let's begin, Janet said crisply. We're here to address the photograph that circulated yesterday and the allegations of improper conduct between Mr. Brown and Miss Fields. She looked at Rebecca first. Miss Fields, can you explain the nature of your relationship with Mr. Brown? Rebecca swallowed hard. He's my supervisor. He's always been professional with me, and yet he visited your room, twice. Martin Drake leaned forward, his tone sharp. Late at night, alone. You understand how this appears. He came to apologize, Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. For an accidental encounter at the pool, he was concerned about. An encounter? Another board member, Patricia Simmons, raised an eyebrow. What kind of encounter? The room waited. Rebecca's face burned, but she kept her composure. An embarrassing one. He walked in while I was swimming. It was late. We were both mortified. He came to my room to apologize properly. That's all. That's all? Martin's skepticism was palpable. And the second visit? Howard spoke, his voice ice. I went to discuss the professional fallout from defending her work at dinner. I realized I'd put her in a difficult position. Janet made a note. Mr. Brown, your behavior at the dinner was noted by several attendees. Your defense of Miss Fields was described as unusually passionate and preferential. Has she received advantages others haven't? She's received recognition she's earned, Howard said flatly. If that's preferential treatment, then yes, I'm guilty. Howard, Rebecca started. Is this a romantic relationship? Patricia asked bluntly. Because if it is, we need to know. The silence stretched. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. It could be, Howard said quietly. If circumstances were different. The room erupted in murmurs. Janet held up a hand. Mr. Brown, you understand the gravity of... I'll resign. Rebecca's voice cut through the noise. Every head turned toward her. Effective immediately. If my presence here compromises Mr. Brown's position or the company's reputation, I'll leave. This isn't his fault. It's mine. Rebecca, no. Howard turned to her, his eyes blazing. It's the right thing to do, she said, her voice breaking. You've built your career here. I won't let. If she leaves, I leave. Howard's words dropped like a bomb. The room went silent. Martin stood, his face reddening. Howard, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Howard's gaze swept the table, cold and unyielding. Rebecca Fields is one of the most talented people in this company. If you force her out because of a photograph and gossip, you're making a colossal mistake, and I won't be part of it. You're willing to throw away 15 years. I'm willing to stand by someone who deserves better than this witch hunt. Patricia exchanged glances with Janet. Martin sat back down heavily. The board members leaned into a whispered discussion. Finally, Janet spoke. We need to deliberate privately. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. Rebecca and Howard left the room in silence, but as the door closed behind them, Howard's hand found hers. You didn't have to do that, Rebecca whispered. Yes, Howard said firmly. I did. Rebecca and Howard waited in the empty lounge, the clock on the wall ticking toward 2 o'clock with agonizing slowness. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say, just the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them both. At 1:47, Janet Morris appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. We need you back in the conference room. Now. Rebecca's stomach dropped. Too early. This is too early. They followed Janet down the hallway, but when they entered, the atmosphere had shifted. Martin Drake looked uncomfortable. Patricia Simmons was reviewing documents with a frown, and at the head of the table sat David Chen, the company's IT security director, his laptop open. "Sit down, please," Janet said, her tone measured but less cold than before. Howard and Rebecca exchanged glances before taking their seats. David turned his laptop screen toward them. "We've completed a forensic review of the leaked photograph per company protocol. The metadata shows it was taken at 9:51 p.m. from a device registered to," he paused, his expression grim, "Marissa Chen, Senior Marketing Coordinator." Rebecca's breath caught. Howard's jaw tightened. "Furthermore," David continued, "we traced the distribution pattern. Miss Chen sent the image to 11 employees between 6:23 and 6:47 a.m. yesterday, with messages suggesting impropriety and encouraging them to share it." Martin leaned back in his chair, his face darkening. This was intentional sabotage. "Where is she?" Howard's voice was dangerously quiet. "Being escorted from the premises," Janet said flatly. "She's been removed from all current projects and will face disciplinary action at headquarters. Depending on the legal review, termination is likely." Patricia cleared her throat. "This changes the nature of our evaluation considerably. The relationship concerns remain, but the circumstances under which they became public were malicious, not organic." Howard leaned forward. "Then let me be clear. Yes, I have feelings for Rebecca. No, I have never shown her professional favoritism beyond recognizing legitimate talent. And yes, I believe any relationship policy should allow for honest disclosure rather than forcing good people into shadows where they become vulnerable to exactly this kind of attack." The board members exchanged looks. Janet folded her hands. "We've discussed this at length. Here's our decision. Miss Fields will be reassigned to report directly to Patricia Simmons, effective immediately. Both of you will complete relationship disclosure forms. Any future relationship will be monitored for conflicts of interest, and both parties will be subject to quarterly ethics reviews for the next year." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "We're not being fired?" "No," Patricia said, almost gently. "You're not. However," Martin added sternly, "any violation of these terms will result in immediate termination. No exceptions. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Howard said. "Yes," Rebecca whispered. Janet handed them each a folder. "Sign these by end of business today. You're both dismissed." They made it halfway down the hallway before Rebecca's legs nearly gave out. Howard caught her elbow, steadying her. "We're okay," he said softly, and for the first time in days, she heard relief in his voice. "We're going to be okay." Rebecca exhaled, a shaky, trembling breath that felt like releasing a weight she'd carried for years. "Yeah," she said, finally believing it. "We are." Rebecca thrived under Patricia Simmons' mentorship in ways she never anticipated. Patricia didn't hover or micromanage. She challenged Rebecca to defend her concepts, pushed her to think bigger, and gave her the creative freedom she'd always craved. Within weeks, Rebecca's designs evolved from cautious and technically sound to bold and visionary. The Riverside Commons project, once shelved as too ambitious, became her proving ground. "This is extraordinary," Patricia said during their weekly review, studying Rebecca's revised elevations. "Submit this to the design committee. Don't wait for permission." Rebecca did. The committee approved it unanimously. Publicly, Howard maintained careful professional distance. He nodded to Rebecca in meetings, praised her work no more than anyone else's, kept his tone neutral and his interactions brief. Privately, they built something real. Quiet dinners at his apartment, where they talked about everything except work. Weekends hiking trails outside the city, where no one from Meridian would see them. Late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn, their voices soft and unguarded. Rebecca learned about Howard's childhood in Boston, his failed engagement years ago, the loneliness that came with always being the person in charge. He learned about her dreams beyond architecture, her fear of never being enough, the way she'd taught herself to take up less space to survive. "You don't have to do that with me," Howard said one evening, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Take up all the space you want." She kissed him then, slow and deep, and felt something inside her finally settle. 6 months after the retreat, Architectural Digest featured Riverside Commons in their annual innovation showcase. The project's sustainable design and community integration earned praise from industry leaders nationwide. Meridian's client list exploded. Interview requests poured in. Rebecca's name was suddenly everywhere. Martin Drake stopped her in the hallway with an awkward smile. "I owe you an apology, Miss Fields. We should have recognized your talents sooner." Patricia threw her a celebration dinner. The entire design team attended. Even Janet Morris offered grudging congratulations. But the moment that mattered most came late that night, when Howard appeared at her apartment door with champagne and pride shining in his eyes. "You did this," he said, pulling her close. "You proved them all wrong. We did this," she corrected. "You believed in me when no one else did." His expression shifted, growing serious. He set down the champagne, taking both her hands in his. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something." Her heart stuttered. "What?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, shook his head with a frustrated laugh. "Not yet. Not here. I want—" He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I want it to be perfect." "Howard." "What?" He kissed her instead of answering, and Rebecca let herself sink into it, trusting that whatever he needed to say would come when the time was right. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at her desk. Inside, a keycard and a handwritten note in Howard's precise script. "Meet me at the Lake Estate this Saturday, 8 p.m. Trust me." Rebecca's hands trembled as she read it twice. She knew exactly where he was taking her. This is it, the moment we've all been waiting for. Rebecca's about to face the place that changed her life forever, but this time, everything is different. If this story has moved you, made you believe in second chances, or reminded you that the right person is worth fighting for, hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments what you think Howard is about to do, and thank you for being part of this journey. The Lake Estate looked different in autumn. Golden leaves scattered across the stone pathways, and the setting sun painted the glass walls in shades of amber and rose. Rebecca's heart hammered as she walked toward the entrance, the keycard trembling in her hand. The building was silent, empty, just like that night. She followed the familiar path down the corridor, her footsteps echoing softly, until she reached the pool room door. It stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Rebecca pushed it open and stopped breathing. The pool glowed with underwater lights, casting rippling reflections across the glass ceiling. Candles lined the edges, dozens of them, their flames dancing in the still air. And standing at the far end, wearing a dark suit but with his tie already loosened, was Howard. He turned when she entered, and the look on his face, vulnerable, nervous, full of hope, nearly undid her. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi." Rebecca stepped inside, the door closing behind her with a quiet click. "Howard, what is this?" He crossed to her slowly, taking her hands in his. "This is where everything began," he said, his voice low and steady. "Where everything changed for me." Rebecca's throat tightened. "Howard, let me say this, please." He squeezed her hands gently. "That night, when I walked through this door and saw you," he paused, his jaw working. "I told myself I was horrified, embarrassed, that I'd violated your privacy and needed to apologize and forget it ever happened." "You did apologize," she whispered. "I lied." His eyes held hers, raw and honest. "Rebecca, I couldn't forget. Not that night, not any night after. Because seeing you like that, so free, so unguarded, so completely yourself, it shattered every wall I'd built. I realized I'd been lying to myself for 2 years, telling myself I was being professional, keeping distance for your sake, when really I was just terrified." "Of what?" "Of this." He released one hand to brush his fingers along her jaw. "Of feeling something I couldn't control. Of wanting someone so much it scared me. Of falling in love with you and not knowing if you'd ever feel the same." Tears blurred Rebecca's vision. "You love me? I'm completely, impossibly in love with you." His voice cracked. "You're the bravest person I know. You stood in front of that board and offered to sacrifice everything for me. You rebuilt your career from scratch and proved everyone wrong. You make me want to be better, kinder, braver, more honest." He released her hands and lowered himself to one knee. Rebecca's breath caught, her heart shattering and rebuilding all at once. Howard pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a simple, elegant ring that caught the candlelight. "Rebecca Fields, I don't want to spend another day pretending I can be professional about you. I want to spend the rest of my life being completely, unprofessionally, desperately in love with you." His voice wavered. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." The word came out as a sob. "Yes, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and pulled her into his arms. Rebecca kissed him through her tears, tasting salt and joy in the future they'd fought so hard to build. When they finally broke apart, Howard rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. "I can't believe we're here," Rebecca whispered. "Where else would we be?" Howard smiled, brushing away her tears. "This is where our story started." They stood at the water's edge, wrapped in each other's arms, the pool reflecting their intertwined shadows. The place that once held fear and vulnerability now held only promise, a foundation built on honesty, sacrifice, and a love that had survived every test. "Take me home," Rebecca said softly. Howard kissed her forehead. "We're already there."